quickly all these resistances appear, and it will behave as a primary factor explaining the lack of success in many cases. Okay, so we need to be aware of this and work on this. And of course, the whole phase, just be flexible personally, not only making amendments with the actions, but also be flexible. And I should have said here, maybe instead of flexible, kind of be resilient. I remember Amaya Lusa, she was explaining that at her university, the Polytechnic University of Catalonia, how they went through a long journey full of actions. They had lots of actions in the gender equality plan. They were so happy. And then they were having so little impact, like very little or no impact at all. So this might happen, okay? This can be like a long journey with no impact. So be not only flexible, but also be resilient there, okay? And just think what we can do about it. So what are the main risks and the common obstacles during implementation, okay? Risk relate to all the success factors that we have been mentioning, not only now, but in our other sessions as well. And of course, risk can be either internal or they can be linked to external factors. So it is not always in our hands to eliminate the obstacles and risks, but at least we need to think about them, and we need to foresee them and think about any possible mitigation measures, okay? So let's see what are the main risks here. First, we won't have a successful implementation if we lack support from the top leadership, okay? This is a major risk, especially when gender equality plans are a very early stage of implementation. And if we don't have, like, if the internal gender equality mechanism are not sufficiently institutionalized, okay, we really need support from top leadership here. And otherwise it will, if we don't have it, the lack of support will undermine the legitimacy of the plan, okay, and its relevance. Then, of course, lack of funding or absence of adequate resources, which leads to place the responsibility of the implementation in the end in very ill-equipped structures that probably will have very little or no autonomy at all. So it will prevent not only the effective implementation, but also it prevents, to a certain extent, it prevents the institutionalization and the sustainability of the planned actions, okay? Then this relates to the next risk, which is lack of institutionalization, okay? Many risks are, of course, connected. And this has to do, the institutionalization has to do with how the gender equality plan is embedded in the general organizational procedures and structures, okay? And it causes, of course, lack of continuity of gender equality policies that will also provoke that capacities and that the knowledge that we have developed will be lost, okay? So, yeah, many times this has to do with the adoption of short-term measures with no long-term impact, okay? So remember the importance of having long-term measures and structural measures, okay, that go for institutionalization. Okay, then, of course, resistances again, but we need to differentiate here two types of resistances, okay? First, these resistances at the intermediate level. This is from, the people that we work on a day-to-day basis. And this is people that normally do not consider the promotion of gender equality a priority for them or a priority for their work, or that will directly deny that the existence of gender inequalities and things like that. And, these are the resistances that are faced on a daily basis by the gender equality advocates and by the people that really want to implement the measures. And then when you go and ask for one data, or you ask for the dissemination of one activity that you want to do, you will face this kind of daily basis resistances, like suddenly it's not communicated, it's not disseminated, information is not flowing, and you're not getting the help that you're supposed to get. So this is going to really stop the implementation of the plan, okay? It's going to hinder change totally, the intermediate level resistances. But then we will also need to work on other kinds of resistances. You know, on the other hand, we have these organizational resistances due to gender-blind bureaucracy and gender-blind processes. This is the long-term or long-established procedures and, as we normally say, the ways of doing at the organization, okay? We're talking here about the organizational logics, the organizational schemes, that in fact, they are what our structural change process need to challenge, okay? So here, the same as we cannot say that science and knowledge production is gender neutral, we cannot treat bureaucracy as if it was politically neutral. Bureaucracy is not politically neutral. It sustains a political system, a political structure, okay? It plays a major role in the maintenance and in the social reproduction of any structure, and of course of patriarchy as well. So we need to think about this. What is the bureaucracy in our institution, and will it help us or just act as a resistance, okay? Next, the gendered character of scientific culture. Okay, this is the persistence of a male-centered scientific culture that we were talking in our first session, which still nowadays remains one of the main risk factors, and it really constitutes a core challenge to gender mainstreaming in research, because it is challenging this fundamental premise of scientific neutrality. So yeah, this is definitely an obstacle. Then we need to talk about the strong competitive and meritocratic culture that can't avoid the implementation of some key structural measures, like, for example, positive actions, which many times come along with the existence of more vertical structures and hierarchical structures, okay? So yeah, think about what we're talking about meritocracy in our first session. This culture makes initiatives promoting gender equality to be perceived kind of against scientific excellence or this promotion of merit alone, okay? So we will need to work on that. And lack of institutional or lack of organizational authority. Okay, there are two sides of this. One is regarding like the formal position of the gender equality unit in our institution. Okay, where is it in the general structure and in the hierarchy? And then on the other hand, this has to do with a more kind of intangible aspect of authority, intangible aspect of power, which relates to the epistemic authority of gender experts, not only of female faculty and in general, but specifically of those gender experts, okay? I'm sure that even if we have a gender equality unit that can be like very high in our structure, like imagine a gender equality unit with as much power as a vice rectorate, but I'm sure that this specific vice rector will have a little bit more epistemic authority than the gender expert dealing with the gender issues at the gender unit. Normally, yeah, maybe not, but hopefully not, but this can happen. This is something that we need to think about also, okay? And of course, these are just some of the main risks, but depending on each institution and depending on each context, we can have other different obstacles. So you can also add some more to the list. So let's go into step number 5 already. Monitoring and evaluation. Okay, evaluation refers to the process of just determining the worth or the significance of any activity, any plan, or any program that we develop. Okay, so as a matter of a general approach to this step, we need to think that evaluation is not only a technical process, but as structural change itself. It is definitely political process. Okay, it's the main goal of evaluation is to generate useful knowledge to improve our political context. So it has definitely a political aspect there that we need to take into account. Okay, so what are the key aspects for monitoring and evaluation? The first one, it is important to distinguish between evaluation and monitoring. Okay, although both feedback exercises about the progress that we made, evaluation would be a more in-depth exercise or analysis of our plan, its design, its implementation and results, while the second one, monitoring, would be a kind of a more brief exercise, okay, related to the ongoing management of the plan, right? Then the second one is that it should be embedded in the gender equality plan, okay? Our JEP should include all monitoring and evaluation instruments that we will use and that will support the effective actions and the accountability of the plan. And of course, it will ensure transparency and also promote collective learning, which is one of the main goals of evaluation also. Then the gender expertise is needed and sometimes possibly external. We can ask for external help here, and gender expertise potentially with other expertise on key issues, like, for example, some expertise on change dynamics or some expertise on gender-based violence or sexual harassment, if we're tackling that in our plan, which we should. Things like this, okay? Some specific expertise can be also needed. Then I think that monitoring and evaluation is not something that starts once the JEB is already implemented, but it starts already with a baseline analysis in step 2, okay? So then we need to address, the evaluation should address all the areas of intervention that we identified for our baseline assessment, okay, and that we used to set up our gender equality plan. Then it should establish indicators, targets, and follow-up instruments, and also allocate resources to assess the actions and to enhance the knowledge about the ongoing implementation, okay? However, as sound and as reasonable this might seem, building proper indicators is not always there, okay? And it seems to be quite problematic for some gender equality plans. And sometimes it's even because the institution itself is resistant to this, maybe because they just perceive that, you know, like if they perceive them as a kind of threat if they are not fulfilled or something like that. So we need to change that approach to evaluation, okay? And just approach it as lessons learned. Then we need to acknowledge how the gender equality structures created are a key resource for monitoring and evaluation. Okay, so they can provide insight. They can help us interpreting the results. They can help us identifying new actions or identifying any amendment needed, modifications, and so on. Okay, so work always with them for that. Then, as we were saying, the first thing is that we need to differentiate what is monitoring and what is evaluation. So we will have one slide for each one. So the first one, monitoring, as we just said, is a tool to improve management on a daily basis, okay, to do this daily basis follow-up of the plan and to provide key information for the evaluation that we're going to do later on. So as such, monitoring could be defined as a continuing function that uses systematic collection of data on specified indicators to provide indications of the extent of progress and achievement of objectives and progress in the use of allocated funds. Okay, so monitoring is crucial to enable seeing where and how actions are being implemented. It will help us identifying and addressing potential sources of resistance to change. And it will indicate whether a transformative dynamic already exists or not, if we're already achieving anything or not, okay? So, yeah, that's it. Keep in mind that monitoring does not mean only looking at figures and looking at data, but that other underlying and qualitative aspects also need to be considered in monitoring, okay? And then we have evaluation, which is a more in-depth and thorough analysis, as we said. And the main features of evaluation are, first one, being systematic. So evaluation should systematically collect all the relevant information for answering our evaluation questions. Then it needs to be context sensitive. Okay, there is no single way of evaluation, and each evaluation exercise must be adapted and tailor-made and context sensitive, okay? Evaluators need to pay attention to all the different structural and contextual elements and to the organizational culture of our institution, and of course be as flexible as possible during the whole evaluation process, okay? Then timeliness. It is important for evaluation to take a time frame also into account and to set milestones, and time limits throughout the evaluation process, okay? This will contribute to, of course, to the organizational learning, but it will also facilitate the decision-making if there is changes, amendments needed or anything. It will facilitate that, okay? Although we know that transforming the organizational cultures, of course, takes time, but yeah, we need to set these time frames, okay? And the evaluation should also pay attention not only to short-term measures, but also to the long-term ones. So we need to think, how are we going to evaluate the impact of those? Then evaluation should focus on what is done, okay? It should focus on the analysis of the plan, of the policies and of the actions that we have already implemented. And we can also look at if at some point we have not been able to implement anything, then we need to think why it's not implemented, but we need to focus on what is done, okay? And why what's not done, why it is not done. And last, evaluation paves the way for future actions, okay? It offers valuable knowledge for the designing of our future actions, okay? Normally, if we're working already in our second or in our third gender equality plan, which might be the case in your institution, you should have included the evaluation of the first, of the previous gender equality plan for the second one, okay? And here you have this, the evaluation is also a step-by-step process within our wider step-by-step institutional change process. So you can see all the different steps of the evaluation plan here in this graphic I brought here. We don't have the time in this training to go deeper into each step of the evaluation process, but I have left the reference. I recommend you to check the guidelines for evaluating gender equality plans that you will find at the end of the presentation, okay? If you want to go a little bit deeper into each one of the steps of, for an evaluation, okay? Sorry for not being able to go into everything. Then, within our evaluation process, we gather all data, we analyze them, and then we elaborate the evaluation report, which should include all these, the indicators and the assessment of the progress made, the identification of remaining inequalities, and recommendations for the next planning round, okay? That is the most important. And here in the drawing, what you can see is that we have different types of evaluation depending on the moment it is conducted, okay? Then Indicators. I brought these because some of you were especially interested in indicators. Monitoring and evaluation are based on indicators, okay? These are really important. And in the end, it's just a measure. It's a number or a fact, an opinion, a perception that will just help to point out the situation and will measure change in that situation over time, okay? So specifically, our indicators should first help you identify whether your work is making a difference or not. They should describe observable changes or events which relate to the project implementation. They should provide the evidence that something has actually happened. And when designing them, we need to be clear on what you want to measure, okay, to assess progress. And your indicators should be used throughout the whole process. Okay, we can set up two kinds of indicators. We can set up quantitative and qualitative indicators. The first one are measures of quantity that should be adapted to the expected results, okay? And they are expressed in numbers or in rates, in frequencies, percentages, and statistical average and things like that, okay? Some examples, it's like percentage of staff trained in gender equality, or the number of female and male candidates for a position, things like that, okay? And so we can go through the examples, but you've got also lots of examples in the gear tool, so just go and check that. And then we have qualitative indicators that will provide a more in-depth understanding of the problem, and that this will include people's judgment or people's perception of the subject that we want to measure, okay? So they focus on the experiences of people, so they're really important for us. And the basic dimensions here that can be considered when we define our qualitative indicators are, first, the mainstreaming of gender knowledge and the awareness among the different categories of staff, including the searches. Then the uptake of the gender equality objectives set by our gender equality plan within the institution, okay? So whether they are owning the gender equality objectives or not. And then the actual transformation of both informal and formal practices in the different key areas, okay? The practices transformation. So these indicators can really contribute to a better understanding of our process, okay? And think that sometimes they can be really easily set up. We think that they're like more complex, but sometimes no. Sometimes they can be answered even with a yes or no question. Like, for instance, knowing if whatever gender equality structure is set up, or if it's mandated, it's endorsed by the top of the organization or not. This is a yes or no question and is a qualitative indicator also, okay? And just a practical tip, when we choose our indicators, we need to keep focus and differentiate what we want to know and what we need to know, okay? So just make the question before defining them. And a practical tip also, use indicators that are relatively easy to collect, okay? And then last, remember, as we were saying, your indicators need to be smart, okay? So let's go for the last part. Sorry, I'm rushing again. Our gender equality plan will conclude at some point, okay? But however, as we already said, okay, this is not the final station, this is not the end towards promoting gender equality. If we have done things somewhat right, we shouldn't be at the same point as we were saying, okay? So from here, we need to ask ourselves, what comes next? Remember what we said about structural change and the cycle approach? The jet might be over, but the change process is still ongoing and should be sustained, okay? A new cycle should start here. Then there is no linear path. So at this point, we look not only forward, but we also look to the road behind us, and we need to look where the backsliding and the regressions occur to extract some lessons learned, okay? Then the gender equality structures remain as a tool to maintain the momentum for change and identify new problems or any new areas of attention that might have been identified, okay? Then we need to look at the final evaluation with the baseline report, okay? We involve all stakeholders in its interpretation, and we can benchmark here again, inside and outside the institution, in fact, again, to gain some knowledge and some ideas. And then from here, we should ask ourselves, is a transition phase needed? Because in some cases, these transition phases are needed, like, for example, if the teams still continue to cooperate, or if they are still delivering some actions, or if they need to gradually reduce their efforts as some other actors take over, things like this, okay? So think about these transition phases. It is likely that some measures will be, of course, already ensured, but others might need like several attempts to finally get to a solution, or might require different or further actions. So think about that. The key aspects, and then we finish. Sorry, it's only 5 minutes left. Okay. We need to strive for sustainability, okay? And this way towards sustainability starts at the very beginning. So all these main drivers and the key aspects are all of those that we have been mentioning throughout the whole process. So let's go through them a little bit quickly, because you should already know them. First, you need to manage your efforts and your energy, and this includes taking care of your own activism, that we will see now. You need to work with your eyes first and build from there since the very beginning, and this is going to be key for sustainability, okay? You need to identify potential windows of opportunities, both at organizational and domestic level, and we need to embed planned actions into the standard and the general frameworks and procedures of the institution for the sake of sustainability. Then we need to be flexible, as we said, and resilient. This is important. And we need to remember the importance of context specificity. Remember that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. Then we need to make change visible and do it through a positive narrative, okay? Remember that. We need to build on existing resources. This will also be key for sustainability, of course. And we need to bridge top-down and bottom-up approaches and actions. As you already mentioned few of these key aspects for implementation, and you already mentioned them. We have already mentioned them since the very beginning. So sustainability is nothing that we think of when we finished and we say, okay, what's next? We need to keep doing that question since the very beginning, okay? And I wanted to end up with a reflection, because a structural change process, in the end, is about changing rules. And even if it seems for us the most sensible things to do, of course it will, who says that changing rules was easy, okay? It was never an easy task. So the thing is that how do we do that? And what does it mean exactly to do it in a sustainable way, okay? So I wanted to bring this quote from Jane Barry and Jelena Djordjevic. I don't know if it's pronounced like that. And they said that sustainability for some people can be even a useless word, okay? Because it's too vague, but it makes sense for others. So we need to give it sense for everyone, okay? We need to make it meaningful for us. So they define, I give you here the quote, they define sustainability as being able to do the work you love and still feeling full and happy in every part of your life, feeling safe, recognized, respected, and valued, okay? So the thing is that we normally only think about the sustainability of the process and the sustainability of the actions. But any process and any action is designed and it's performed and it's implemented by people. And it's people who is going to be facing resistances, and it's people that it's not provided with the tools to manage them. And it can be exhausting work. And it can be really tiring and exhausting to defend something in which you believe, but part of the organization and of the organizational culture is still resistant to move forward. So this is going to be a tiring process. So we need to think about the sustainability of our activism, okay? So the last thing I wanted to say is you need to just take care of yourself and take a deep breath before starting. Please look for your allies, look for them, and go ahead. And good luck with your gender equality plans. You have some useful resources, of course. Yeah, I hope it was useful. So thank you for everything and for being there the 3 days. And yeah, good luck to all of you.